Have you felt like you've been camped really hard by an enemy jungler before? Or maybe you just had that one bad time where you got ganked and then you started losing lane because of it. Regardless of what the situation might be, I'm here to teach you guys how to avoid getting ganked almost every single time. First things first though, if you guys think I finally no longer sound like Google Translate's new text-to-speech program, then make sure you hit that like button. That way, I know that at least I'm doing something right. If you guys enjoy what I'm making and want more, make sure that you subscribe and turn on your notifications. That way, you don't miss a single video. Back to avoiding ganks though, let's talk about the number one most important thing to pay attention to in order to set yourself up to avoid a gank. What do you think it is? If you were thinking about where you were standing in lane, well, congratulations, you got it right. But chances are, you were thinking of a lot of other things that aren't really actually that important. Where you stand in lane at any given point in time is the number one factor in deciding whether or not you can be ganked. Why? Well, it's simple. How quickly can you react to your opponent? Unless you're some kind of machine programmed to beat Faker, there's a limit to how quickly you could recognize your opponent is coming to gank you. With this in mind, you don't want to get too close to a bush or a wall that your enemy could potentially come through and gank you, because the closer you are, the more susceptible you are to ganks. It could set you up to be hit by an Elise cocoon, or maybe a Shaco can get behind you with his Q. Whatever it might be, if you're in a place where they can hit you or get to you, that's where you don't want to be. This sounds kind of simple, and I mean it is. It's just, don't stand where you can get hit. That's about what it is. But this gets complicated when you think about how you get farm while still staying safe. You can't just sit back all game and expect to do well with no gold and very little experience. So how do you play around this? Well, we already talked about step one, and that's understanding when you're in a dangerous spot. You need to understand where and how the enemy can gank you. Keep in mind that this is always, and I mean always, champion specific. If you're facing an Elise, you should know that she can launch her cocoon from a brush and hit you when you're almost in the center of mid lane. You gotta watch out for that sort of thing. Even if it's not a jungler. Say a support has roamed and is trying to gank your lane. It could be a Pyke or a Leona. You gotta know that they can launch something from a bush or maybe behind a wall near you and hit you with a hook or a stun or a root, whatever it might be. You gotta understand that it could happen and put yourself in a spot where it can't happen. So you know that you want to be as safe as possible as much as you can. Sometimes you gotta get a little risk involved, get some CS, maybe you're gonna end up trading. You wanna be careful though. As much as you possibly can, don't put yourself in unnecessary danger. It's not all set in stone though. Yeah, it depends on their champion, but if you do some clever things, you can make yourself even harder to gank. Example number one. If you're playing mid lane and you put a ward towards the enemy raptors, you're pretty safe from anything that could come at you on that side of the map. So, where exactly does it make you safer to stand? Well, the entire side of the lane that's towards that side of the map where your ward is. If you play away from the half of the map that you don't have a ward on, well, the enemy isn't going to be able to surprise you from close. They have to reach you on the opposite side of the lane that they're trying to gank from, and that makes it much, much harder. Sure, there's still some champions that can do it because they have long-range skill shots like maybe an Elise cocoon could tag you, but it's a lot less likely and a lot harder. Example number two, using your minions and the incoming minion wave. If you're playing mid lane, or any lane for this matter, if you have a minion wave coming in and you have an ability like Jack's Q that allows you to jump onto them or blink onto them, then you can extend further into your lane. Why? You have a free method of escape. Your minions are coming in and you can just hop to them and get away. It's much safer to time CS or trades with this kind of thing so that you don't get killed by a gank at that time. Even if you don't have some kind of mobility, the minions can block skill shots for you. As they're walking along, it is almost impossible to get hit by a skill shot. But they'll likely eat a Nidalee Spear or a Thresh Hook or an Elise Cocoon, and you won't have to worry about it. Example number three, if you have been laning against somebody for, let's say, a couple minutes, and you kind of have a feeling for how they're playing the lane, if all of a sudden your opponent just starts monkey running it down at you, chances are he's got some backup. You might want to consider that he's trying to bait you into a fight. And if you see this, you can avoid a gank. It might look really juicy to take that fight, but don't do it. It's a trap. While I'm steering you away from gank traps, let me steer you towards a great option for improving your gameplay. You should absolutely go check out our website, GameLeap.com. There are tons and tons of videos, whether it be champion-specific content, lane-specific content, or generic guides. We have almost everything that you could ever want there. But the stuff that's missing, we want to hear from you guys what you want next, so that we can work on it and bring you even more challenger level educational content so you guys can take your game to the next level. We get to go super in depth on the website, which we can't really do here on YouTube. So if you want even more content, make sure you check it out in the description below. We've talked about understanding where your enemy can gank from, where to place vision to help create a better safe area for you to stay in, and playing towards your vision so that you limit the options of your opponent, especially if they don't have long range. So what's left? Really, we've only been talking about the enemy ganking you. We haven't mentioned at all who you're laning against, and that's actually really important. If your enemy is somebody like TF in the mid lane, or maybe Darius or Nasus top lane, those really impactful CCs can cause a gank to work almost anytime. Things might be getting a little bit complicated now, and that's fine. It's tough to juggle paying attention to your opponent, paying attention to your wards and what you might see on them, paying attention to the wave, and paying attention to where you're standing in relation to the enemy jungler. It can be really tough and takes a lot of practice. But believe it or not, despite those 4 things already being out of the way, we're not done yet. Let's talk about some ways that you can get yourself out of bad situations when you feel like you might be doing something wrong. So, if you feel like your enemy wave is a bit too far away and you're not very comfortable being in lane at that spot, what you should immediately do is either leave and go do something else somewhere, like roam and gank, or try your absolute hardest to shove that wave into their tower as quick as you possibly can. Leaving and roaming is the safest option, but it's also the riskiest one. Because if you get nothing out of just leaving, chances are you might lose a ton of golden experience while you're out of lane, and that can be catastrophic. If you think that you want to try and shove that wave in really quickly, and you start walking towards it, and your opponent starts walking towards you, you're going to put that thing in reverse real quick, because chances are the enemy jungler is right there about to jump on you. The middle ground here is briefly leaving your lane to put a ward that gives you some hope of getting away from a gank if the jungler comes. While you're doing this, you absolutely should watch your enemy laner. If they start walking towards you and ignoring minions that are dying near them, the jungler is probably about to jump on top of you. You want to immediately head towards your tower at that point, or maybe head towards the wall and use a mobility spell over, whatever the safest option at that time is. Now that we've covered what to do when you're already in a bad scenario and how to keep yourself out of those bad scenarios as best as possible, let's talk about the more obvious things that people kind of ignore. Let's say you just solo killed your enemy laner, and you want to go take a tower plate maybe. Maybe you should think twice about doing that if you're kinda low or low on mana, or maybe you're just too weak for some reason to beat the enemy jungler in a 1v1 at that point. No matter what it is, at any given point you should always consider what happens when the enemy jungler comes towards you. If you're thinking about greeting for that tower plate, well, think again. You might want to avoid doing that. Once you've already got that kind of lead, recalling is a good option. You should spend the gold that you have to further press your lead on your enemy. Maybe you just kinda got in a scuffle as soon as you got back in lane and you don't have a lot of gold, and you're not terribly low, but you don't have any potions or anything. Well, maybe you should go look for a honey fruit then. Don't sit in lane and get yourself ganked. Maybe just shove the wave really quickly and then leave and go look for that thing to go restore your health and mana. While you're on your way out there to go pick up some fruit, may as well drop a ward. It might keep you safer. As long as you put it in a good spot, it'll get something done for you. Let me throw out some numbers so that you guys understand just how big of a difference this can make. If you recall, you waste 8 seconds going back to base, let's say 4 seconds, which is pretty slow, of buying items, and then you gotta walk back to lane. We're not gonna bother timing that because that's not the important part. If you end up dying to a jungle gank, you're not just wasting 8 seconds to go back. you're looking at a 20, 30, maybe even more second death timer, and during that time, you're gonna miss experience and gold from minion waves, tower plates, and more. The simplest way that I can sum this concept up is that losing out on a bit now to be a little bit more safer will prevent you from losing out more in the future. Even if you've got good health and mana, and you still got a summoner spell up, there's no reason to waste it, and there's no reason to risk dying when you can just go back and do what you did again. Maybe kill your enemy laner, or get a ton of farm, or get more tower plates. Whatever it might be, it's better than dying. If you can understand this concept of why ganks are so bad and how they swing a lane because you end up missing more than your laner actually does, and then you understand how to avoid them, you're going to have a much better time climbing in solo queue. Especially now with the way the jungle is, it's really easy for junglers to fall 2 or maybe even 3 levels behind the enemy solo laners. You should watch for opportunities and not allow the enemy junglers to snowball to the point where they're as strong or stronger than you. But if you want even more to make you that much better than your opponents and strengthen your game, you should absolutely check out our website, GameLeap.com. We've got tons and tons of content on there, and all of it's made by challenger level players, including myself. I'm currently working on Jack specific guides right now, but I want to hear from you guys what you want to see next. We can go way more in depth than we can here on YouTube, so the amount of topics and the topics themselves that we can cover are way different. Don't just take it from me though, you should check out all the other content that our other creators have made. You might even recognize some of the names for the guides on certain champions. We've brought in some famous streamers and pro players to do guides. If you've made it this far, thanks for watching guys. My name is Ace Windstorm, and I will see you all later.